The air is thick with tension. Every seat is filled, yet the room feels heavier than its capacity. Conversations have faded into whispers, eyes locked onto the stage where two figures stand in silence. This is not just another debate. It is a collision of ideas, a moment where words will either build bridges or burn them down. Every person in the room knows what happens tonight will not be forgotten. Karoline Leavitt, sharp and unshaken, is ready to expose what she believes is a dangerous misuse of language. Across from her, Ilhan Omar stands firm, prepared to defend every word she has ever spoken in the name of justice. Their approaches could not be more different, yet both carry the same weight: responsibility. The silence stretches. The anticipation grows. Then the moderator steps forward. Tonight, we discuss not just words, but the consequences they create. The debate has begun. Ilhan Omar steps forward, her expression firm, her eyes scanning the audience. The weight of her words is already felt before she speaks. When she finally does, her voice is steady, filled with purpose. We are not here as enemies. We are here as guardians of what is right. The choices we make, the words we speak, and the battles we fight determine the future we leave behind. Silence is never an option when injustice thrives. She pauses for a moment, allowing the message to settle. The room is still, waiting for her next words. For too long, many have cried for help and been ignored. They have waited for justice, only to see their suffering dismissed. When people are abandoned by those in power, when their dignity is stripped away, what choice do they have but to raise their voices? What choice do they have but to demand change? Her tone sharpens. She does not hesitate. History teaches us one truth: change never comes from silence. Progress has always been the result of those who refused to sit quietly while the world stayed broken. We remember those who stood up, who took to the streets, who refused to be invisible. Their voices moved nations. Their courage brought justice. Their words built movements that reshaped society. If they had whispered, would the world have heard them? She looks to the crowd, searching for understanding in their faces. Some nod, others remain motionless. My words are not meant to divide, but to awaken. They carry the pain of those who have been ignored, the struggle of communities left behind. Some may call them dangerous. I call them necessary. We do not speak to create conflict, we speak to end it. We speak because without action, suffering continues. She takes a breath, her voice filled with conviction. When I call for people to rise, I am not calling for destruction. I am calling for dignity. When I say we must fight, I do not mean with weapons. I mean with courage, with unity, with an unshakable demand for fairness. I will not apologize for speaking the truth. I will not soften my words to comfort those who benefit from silence. The atmosphere in the room tightens. Some shift in their seats, others lean in closer. The oppressed do not have the luxury of waiting. They cannot afford to be patient while their lives are destroyed by indifference. So I will not wait. I will not watch as voices are silenced and call it peace. True peace comes from justice, and justice demands action. She steps back slightly, her gaze unwavering. The choice is simple. We can stay quiet, or we can speak so loudly that no one can ignore us. I choose to speak, and I will not stop. The room remains still. The impact of her words lingers. The debate has begun. Karoline Leavitt steps forward with measured confidence. Her expression is calm, but there is a firmness in her stance. She takes a moment, letting the weight of Ilhan's words linger before responding. When she speaks, her voice is steady, controlled, deliberate. I do not question your passion. I do not doubt your commitment, but I do challenge your approach. She looks directly at Ilhan, then scans the audience, ensuring every ear is tuned in. We all want justice. We all believe in accountability. But words are not just words. They shape actions. They have consequences. And sometimes, even the most well-intended speech can ignite something far beyond what was meant. She steps slightly forward, her tone sharpening, though still composed. History is filled with moments where words, spoken in the heat of the moment, led to destruction rather than progress. We have seen movements driven by powerful speeches. Some changed the world for the better, but others fueled chaos, fear, and division. When we urge people to rise up without clear boundaries, when we demand action without ensuring restraint, we risk losing control of the very change we seek. The audience listens in silence, absorbing her words. In a time when every phrase can be taken out of context, when a single sentence can spread across the world in seconds, we must recognize the weight of what we say. A call for justice should never be mistaken for a call to arms, but that distinction is not always clear to those who hear it. And that is where the danger lies. Her voice grows firmer, carrying the authority of someone who has seen how words can spiral beyond their original intent. We have witnessed how reckless rhetoric can be twisted, misused, and manipulated. It only takes one person, one group, to interpret a message in a way that leads to destruction. And once that fire is lit, it cannot always be contained. She pauses for a moment, allowing the silence to deepen the impact of her words. Then, she takes a breath and continues. You say you speak for those who have been ignored, that you cannot afford to wait. I understand that, but urgency should not come at the cost of stability. Progress should not be fueled by words that could be taken as permission for unrest. Some in the audience nod, others remain still, waiting for what comes next. We have a responsibility not just to those we speak for, but to the world that hears us. When we use phrases like, fight for justice or take to the streets, we may mean them as calls for peaceful activism. But can we always control how they are understood? Can we ensure that no one will take them as an excuse for violence? She looks directly at Ilhan again, her expression unwavering. If we truly care about those we represent, then we must be careful. Because if our words lead to harm, we cannot take them back. And no matter how noble our intentions, the damage will be done. The tension in the room is thick. Some are deep in thought, weighing both sides. Others shift in their seats, uncomfortable with the reality Karoline is forcing them to confront. She takes a final step back, her tone softening slightly but still firm. We all want justice. We all want voices to be heard. But the question is, can we achieve it without risking the very peace we claim to fight for? She lets the question hang in the air, then steps away. The debate is far from over. Ilhan Omar steps forward again, her expression unwavering. She does not hesitate. You speak of caution, she says, her voice strong. But what happens when caution becomes an excuse for inaction? When entire communities cry out for justice, yet their voices are met with silence? What choice do they have but to speak louder? To push harder? To demand change? She scans the room, her words directed at more than just her opponent. History has proven that change is never comfortable. It does not come from polite requests or quiet negotiations. It comes from those who refuse to wait. If the world only listened to whispers, we would still be living in the shadows of oppression. The civil rights movement, the fight against apartheid, women's suffrage, none of these victories were won by people who spoke softly. They were won by those who stood, who fought, not with violence, but with voices too strong to be ignored. The audience shifts, some nodding in agreement, others waiting for Karoline's response. Karoline does not move from her position. She keeps her voice calm, but there is an unmistakable sharpness in her tone. I am not telling people to sit in silence, she counters, but I am warning against the dangers of words used without thought. When leaders speak, they do not just inspire. They also influence, they provoke, and at times they unintentionally incite. You say that people must push harder. But what happens when someone hears that as permission for destruction? What happens when emotion overtakes reason, and your words are used to justify chaos? She pauses, letting the weight of her question settle. We have seen it before, she continues, her voice unwavering. Leaders who spoke with fire in their hearts, believing they were calling for justice, only to see their words twisted. Their supporters take a step too far, their movements hijacked by those seeking not reform, but disorder. Look at what has happened in recent years. Protests meant for peace have turned into violence, not because the message was wrong, but because someone took it further than it was meant to go. Ilhan shakes her head, stepping forward again. Then what is your solution, Karoline? She asks. To filter every word until it no longer carries meaning? To make our speech so safe, so careful, that it no longer demands anything? The oppressed do not have the luxury of carefully crafted sentences. They do not have time to package their pain in a way that makes those in power comfortable. When people are ignored, they shout. And if they are still unheard, they shout louder. The tension in the room thickens. Karoline does not back down. Your passion is undeniable, she says. But passion alone is not enough. Passion without responsibility is a risk. And when people look to you, when they take your words as a call to action, you must ask yourself, are you guiding them toward real solutions? Or are you fueling a fire that cannot be controlled? Ilhan's expression hardens. I do not call for destruction, she says. I call for dignity. I call for justice that cannot wait. I call for a system that no longer forces people to beg for their basic rights. And if that means I must speak in a way that makes some uncomfortable, then so be it. The comfort of those in power has never been my priority. Karoline's eyes narrow slightly. You say you do not call for destruction, but you cannot control how your words are received, she says. You believe urgency justifies strong language, and I understand that. But urgency does not justify recklessness. Words are not just sound. They carry consequences, and you must own every one of them. The debate is no longer just an exchange of opinions. It is a battle between two unshaken beliefs, neither willing to yield. The audience remains silent, captivated by the collision of conviction and caution playing out before them. The emotional peak. A personal story changes everything. Karoline takes a slow breath, her expression unreadable. Then, she begins, her voice quieter than before, but firm. I once believed that words alone couldn't cause harm, she says. I thought that as long as my intentions were right, nothing else mattered. But I was wrong. The room is silent. She looks out at the audience, as if measuring whether they are ready to hear what comes next. A few years ago, I spoke at a town hall meeting, she continues. People were frustrated. They felt unheard. I told them what they needed to hear. I said they should demand answers, that they should hold their leaders accountable and refuse to back down. She exhales sharply, as if remembering the moment in vivid detail. The next day, a group of people gathered outside a government building. At first, they chanted. Then some got angry. Someone threw a rock. Then another. Soon, a peaceful demonstration turned into something else entirely. Windows were shattered. Police arrived. People were arrested. And the worst part? It wasn't even what I said that caused it. It was how my words were taken by those who heard them. Her voice tightens. I didn't tell anyone to break the law. I didn't call for violence. But that didn't matter. My words had spread, and by the time they reached the wrong ears, they had changed into something I never intended. That day, I learned that once you release words into the world, you can't control where they go. You can't decide how they will be used. She pauses, letting the weight of her story settle. I will never forget that moment, she finishes. It changed how I speak, how I think. And it made me understand that as leaders, we don't just inspire. We are responsible for every ripple our words create. She steps back, her story hanging heavy in the air. Ilhan watches her closely. Then she moves forward. Her voice, when she speaks, carries something deeper than debate. I know what it feels like when words spiral out of control, she says. But I also know what happens when words are never spoken at all. She looks toward the audience, as if searching for someone who understands. I grew up in a place where people were told to stay quiet, she says, where speaking out meant risking everything. I have seen what silence does. It suffocates, kills dreams. It lets injustice thrive, because those who benefit from it count on one thing, that people will be too afraid to speak. Her voice trembles, but she does not stop. I remember a woman from my community, someone who lived under rules she never agreed to. She wanted to fight back, but no one listened. She was told to wait, to be patient, to trust that one day things would change. But she didn't have the luxury of waiting. And because she had no voice, she lost everything. Ilhan's eyes darkened with emotion. When she finally tried to fight for herself, it was too late. And the worst part? No one even remembers her name. She looks directly at Karoline now, her voice steady. "You say words can be dangerous," she says. "I say silence is worse. You regret what happened because people misunderstood you. I regret what happens when people don't speak at all. Because when injustice prevails, silence is not just a choice. It is complicity." The room is heavy with emotion. No one moves. No one speaks. Two stories, two truths, and a debate that is no longer just about words. It is about what happens when they are spoken and when they are not. The room is still. No one speaks. The air is thick with the weight of everything that has been said. Ilhan Omar and Karoline Leavitt stand on opposite sides of the stage, both unyielding, both convinced of their stance. But something is different now. The fire of debate has settled into something deeper: understanding, reflection, recognition. Ilhan is the first to break the silence. Her voice is steady, her tone softer than before. "I do not deny the responsibility that comes with words," she says. "I understand that they can be taken out of context, misused, twisted by those who seek to divide. But I also know that words, real, honest, powerful words, are the only thing that has ever forced change. If I have to choose between speaking boldly or staying silent in fear of being misunderstood, I will always choose to speak." She looks toward the audience, her gaze unwavering. "I will never tell the unheard to wait. I will never tell the oppressed to be careful with their pain. Their suffering does not come in measured tones, and neither should their demands for justice." She steps back. Her statement is final. Karoline nods slightly, as if acknowledging the weight of Ilhan's words. Then she steps forward. Her voice is calm but firm. "And I will never tell people to stay silent," she says. "I will never say that we should ignore injustice or suppress the truth. But I will say this: leaders do not have the luxury of speaking without considering the consequences. We do not get to unleash words and walk away without thinking about where they will land. Our responsibility is not just to speak, but to guide." She pauses, choosing her next words carefully. "Change is necessary, but stability matters too. If we do not protect both, we are not leading, we are just shouting." She lets the statement settle before stepping back. The audience is left in deep thought. There is no clear winner, no moment of concession. Both sides have made their case, and both have left an undeniable mark. Some in the crowd glance at each other, as if silently weighing what they have just heard. Others sit motionless, processing every word. The moderator steps forward, but there is no need to declare a conclusion. The debate does not end with a resolution, it ends with a choice. A choice each listener must make for themselves. As the event draws to a close, one thing is certain: this conversation will not be forgotten. The debate is over, but its echoes remain. As the crowd disperses, conversations continue in hushed tones. Some leave deep in thought, others with firm convictions strengthened. The energy of the night lingers in the air, refusing to fade. Beyond the walls of the auditorium, the world reacts. Within hours, Ilhan Omar's fiery words spread across social media. Supporters praise her fearless stance, calling her a voice for the unheard. They share clips of her most powerful moments, declaring that justice requires boldness, that silence is no longer an option. At the same time, Karoline Leavitt's warnings take on a life of their own. Commentators highlight her message of caution, emphasizing that words carry weight far beyond their intention. Some call her a voice of reason, arguing that leadership demands responsibility, not just passion. Others debate whether restraint is wisdom or just another form of fear. News outlets dissect every exchange. Analysts weigh in: was this debate a turning point in public discourse? Did it expose a fundamental divide in how people believe change should happen? Some say it was a battle of ideology. Others believe it was a necessary conversation long overdue. Politicians and activists respond, each side using the discussion to fuel their own perspectives. Some call for more conversations like this, open, raw, unfiltered. Others worry about the division it might deepen. Days pass, but the impact remains. Articles are written. Editorials debate the fine line between urgency and responsibility. People continue to ask themselves the question posed that night: do words shape progress, or do they risk creating chaos? In the end, one truth stands unshaken. Words are the most powerful tools we have, and how they are used will always determine whether they build or destroy. The discussion is far from over.